Hey everybody, welcome to Premiere OnScript. I'm Eli, and this week we are going to start off in an application that's not our normal stomping grounds. We're here in Microsoft Excel, just a place that we need to be in order to run the script I'm going to show you. What this script is going to do is it's going to prompt us for a CSV file. We can target one, click OK, then it's going to prompt us to create a new sequence. I'll choose a 1080 preset of mine, click OK, and we're going to see this script go to work. Now, what this is doing is it's importing files one by one based out of that CSV file we just saw in Excel. And once it's completed importing these files, you'll see it does a pretty cool thing for us. It's going to rip through those, create a folder called subclips, and we will now have a sequence with all of those movies that we had in the Excel file placed into that sequence. Let's go back to this Excel file to show you just what it is. A lot of times as editors, we actually get a fair amount of data in. And a lot of times the data is in spreadsheets because we're working with producers, and they've done some of the organization process for us. In here, in this example, we have names of clips, time ins, timeouts, and file paths for all of these clips. So imagine you're doing a freelance project and someone sends you a hard drive, and you have all this information about the footage they want to pull out of this like 5 terabytes of data, and these are the file paths, these are the in times, these are the out times. We need you to go in and edit those sections. Those are the sections with the good sound bites. And so they give us this information. We got to bring it into Premiere. We got to go through those time codes and put everything in. But it'd be a whole lot nicer if we could just use the spreadsheets that they've already created for us. So what I've done in here is this is an Excel file, and you can just go to File, Save As, and save it out as a CSV file. If you come down in the Save dialog box, you can come down and save it as a CSV UTF-8. And that's going to spit out a CSV file that looks similar to this guy. Basically, the exact same thing as the Excel file, except instead of nice little cells, it's splitting everything up by lines and by commas. Now, this is a common way of getting information around, and in February, a guy named Scott reached out over the channel. He's a viewer, and he asked for the CSV example. So Scott, sorry it's taken so long, but we're finally getting around to this. In this 3-part series, what I'm going to do is walk you through creating a script just like this. And I know I just did 5 clips here, but you can extend this to as many as you want. Earlier before this, I did a long speed test, and I just kind of duplicated those movies that we had up here in the previous example down and to the point where we had over 40 clips. And I ran that to see how fast it would go through and accomplish everything I wanted it to do in the whole script. And it was pretty fast. The limiting factor is importing the movies into Premiere. Once you get everything imported, the script finishes up within less than a second. So if you are interested in learning how to get information into Premiere via CSVs, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be grabbing CSV information, we're going to be importing files, we're going to be creating subclips so that you can get smaller portions of larger video files down into your sequence. Then we're going to be creating a new sequence and dropping all of those subclips into the sequence. So we're going to make this a 3-part series. In this first movie, what we're going to do is just focus on the CSV and the import. In the next one, part 2, we are going to focus exclusively on subclips, and in the final one, we'll talk about dropping all of those clips down into the timeline. So that's going to be the way that I try and split this up so that we're not running like, 30, 45 minutes into this really long tutorial video. We're gonna split it all up like that. So let's go back in one more time and look at our example setup Excel file, which we can imagine this being either a spreadsheet that we form or that comes through with a bunch of media that we need to edit, or that's handed over from like Google Sheets in like a collaborative document that you're sharing with a producer. So in here we have all the information we need. In the first row we just have the labels, but down here we have the names, we have the time in of that media that we want to focus on and the time out, and then we have the file path to that, and these are just example files. So what the first step is we need to get this CSV file into Premiere. And so once we save this Excel as a CSV, we can come in here and we'll start things off by going variable CSV file.openDialog target CSV file, and then we're going to put this little star thing here, .csv. This will be different if you're on a Mac. And this way, when you run the script, it is going to come down here and it's going to only allow or only show CSV files as you're digging through your file system. So that's really handy. So once you select your CSV, then you're going to go to that same CSV file, csvfile.fsname. This is going to format that file path in a more friendly manner. And then I'm going to create the new sequence because I just want to create that at the start. I don't want this to go through that whole importing every single clip and then at the end have a user interaction. I'd rather get all the user interactions done at the beginning of the script. That way, if someone wants to run this, they say, all right, here's a CSV file, here's the sequence. I'm going to go grab some coffee while Premiere's doing the import, and I'll come back to a setup sequence. Here we just have a few administrative counters that we're going to set up, some variable counters, and we'll run into these as we run through the rest of the script, and I'll call them out as we get there. Then we have a variable buffer time. This buffer time is going to be the amount of time that we have in between each of our clips in our sequence. You could have them on top of one another, but if I'm just doing a rough cut and just trying to get all of the sound bites that I need into my sequence, I don't mind having them split up a little bit. Let's go out to that CSV file and let's get this data. So if the CSV file exists, what we're going to do is create a variable, call it variable file, and then go file.csv file, which is going to just create a new file instance, and we're going to open that file. We are going to create a variable, call it full text. We will read that file, and then we'll close that file. And now we have this variable full text, which holds all of the text data of this Excel document. So now what we can do with that is, as I showed you before, the way this is formatted, it splits up the rows by a new line, and then it splits up every cell by a comma. So what we're going to do is we're going to split up a multi-tiered array out of those different commas and lines. So the first thing we have to do is split it up by line to kind of segment out every single one of our files that we want to import. So we have this new info array variable, which we really should create it up here. Our info array. We'll just do that, add that in. Now it's created up here, and we're going to say info array is full text dot split at \n. At this /n, split full text. So now what's going to happen is we have this Excel file, the CSV file, that has 6 rows in it, which means that it's going to jump to a new line like 6 times. So every time it jumps to a new line, it's going to create a new array object. So now this line right here is going to be array index 0. This will be array index 1, index 2, index 3, array index 4, and array index 5. Now we have an array, just a simple array, with all of these split up by commas. And we can use that same idea to go through and split up the commas. So now that we have info array split up into 6 items, we're going to loop through that info array based on its length, and then go info array A, which is one of those lines, split it up based on the commas. So what this is going to do is now we are going to have a multi-tiered array. And that way we can go in, and if I want to access, say, this piece of information right here, I can go, okay, index 0, index 1, index 2. So this is going to be info array index 2, and then 0, 1, 2. So this would be info array index 2, index 2, written out like this. If you're just looking down, say info array 2, 2, and it would return this cell of information right here. Super helpful when it comes to importing CSV files. Now, sometimes a weird thing happens, however, where when you're importing this information, it'll create a new line at the very end. It registers that there's a new line, and so we're going to have this little loop down here that just goes if infoarray.length minus 1 is equal to nothing, because that new line's not going to have anything on it. Then we're going to splice off the last line of infoarray. It's basically just adding in something when we're creating this info array that we don't need. So yeah, it's good. It's good just to test to make sure that the last bit of information that we have in this info array, in this multi-tiered array, is a valid, useful piece of information, so that we're not looping through anything we don't need to and introducing any possibilities of errors. So now if we were to run this, I'm going to delete this alert so we can see that, and then I'm going to comment out all the stuff that comes down here. That way we can see exactly what we've done, all commented out. And now when we run this, it's going to ask us for the CSV. It's going to ask us again for the sequence. And it's going to alert us what we have stored in info array. So this is no longer living inside the CSV file in our file system. This is data that Premiere is storing in ExtendScript that we have access to. So you can see the first line, the second line, and then it's not spacing out the different new lines of the multiple tiers. But take my word for it, this is formatted correctly, and we have all that data now in Premiere to use however we'd like to. So now that we have that, let's create a new bin. Let's call the new bin original clips. I like to keep things organized when I'm running scripts. They run so quick, there's no reason not to keep everything super organized. That way, when you come back, you see this great organization of everything where it needs to be. So we're going to create that original clips bin. And then we are going to run our find bin index function, which we covered in an earlier movie. You can learn how to set that function up in this movie number 6. Target any bin within your Premiere file structure. So that is calling, declaring a variable import bin and setting it equal to the find bin index function, which you can find down here in the function list. We can see find bin index. It's just going to go through all the bins in the project till it finds the one that we are looking for. In this case, we're looking for a bin titled original clips, which is, what we just created. Then, once again, if you have been keeping up with these videos or watched some of my previous videos, you'll know how to import files into Premiere. That video can be found in video number 10 if you're interested in learning that. But for now, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be going through the info array, and we are going to be going through and looping through the file paths and importing these one by one. The reason I figured out to do these one by one is so that I can keep and rename the files so that I keep the order intact. That way, if I'm using the same file but a different time code, I'm keeping the order of this data so that I can always access the correct in points and out points that I'm specifying in my spreadsheet. So we'll come back to that a little bit later. But basically the way this works is we're going to go if info array exists. Let's loop through our info array.length. Now we're going to start at I equals 1 because that first row of the CSV is not important, right? We just have these headers. We don't need those. This would be index array 0, right? So let's start at index array 1. So now that we're in there, we're going to set import array right here, index 0 to info array I.3. Now here's where that multi-tiered array kind of comes in very clearly. What we're doing is as we're looping through this info array, we're setting this import array 0 to the 4th item in our CSV file, which 1, 2, 3, 4 we can see is the file path. So here, starting at 1, we're going, info array, index 1, index 3, info array index 2, index 3, info array index 3, index 3, and we're just pumping those file paths into this loop. Now that helps us because the next line is going to be app.project.importFiles import array, which is just going to be one file at this time. And that's kind of a different method than I used in the earlier Premiere OnScript video. But again, this is just so that I can keep track of the movies as they're coming in. So we're going to go import array. We're going to set this to 1. We're going to choose the import bin because I want to import these directly into original clips. We already have the bin index of the original clips bin. So we're going to import these files directly into the import bin. And then we're going to add one to that import count, which we created up here. And that's going to keep track of what number file we have coming in. So it's the 3rd file we've imported. Is it the 4th? Is it the 5th? Is it the 60th file we've imported? It's going to keep track of that. So once it has imported, and remember this is just importing the very first file in our loop, then we're going to come down and we're going to go into the import bin. And if the file name, as we loop through the import bin, does not have a space dash space, if the index of that is not there, then we know that we haven't formatted the name yet. Because in all of these file path names, there's no space dash space down here, right? So this is going to be our way of knowing that we haven't touched it yet. We haven't done anything like that. And what we're going to do is, so after we test for that space dash space, we're going to go import bin children a dot name is equal to space import counter space dash space and then the import bin name. So this renames it with the number it was imported, and we can see what that looks like if we come in here. Let me run the script really quick. And it's going to import these one by one. What this looks like is it looks like this. So now we have, if we were to like compare our spreadsheet and our Premiere side by side, we can see that the first item we imported was this blog 5 export movie. The second one, based on this, is 2 is the MVI 1994. We can see that number 5 imported was the log 13 part 2 in this name. So that's my way of knowing how these come in. And then once I know where they were imported, if this was the, the 5th item imported, well, I know this is the 5th item in the info array. So I know that the way I want to set this when we get to creating our smaller subclips, we have this subclip information right here. Now, one more thing I want to do, just to add more information to the CSV file that we have stored in our script, I also want to take that import bin.children_a.nodeID. And what that is, it's that clip that we've imported, the node ID, which is the unique identifier within Premiere of that clip. And I want to push this out to the end of our info array. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go info array I based on the loop up here, and then have the second index be info array I.length, which would be the length of, how many are in here. Because that's counting at 1, we're going to have an overshoot. So it's going to be telling us that we have, 4 items, when really if we start at 0, we have 0, 1, 2, 3. So it's going to be giving us the index of this 4th non-existent array slot right here. And we're going to set that to the node ID so that if then we alerted our info array, which we have up here, just move that down, and we ran this script again. I'm going to delete all this so that we can see it fresh. I'm going to speed through this so you don't have to watch through those imports. And now in our info array, we have pushed to the end of each one of these the unique identifier of each one of those clips. So we can see the first one, that blog 5 export, is 000F42EE. The next one, if we come down here, is 000F42EF. The very last one is 000F42EF. F42, F2. So now we have those unique identifiers in that row. That way in the future, we can always go through, and if we have the same file in our project multiple times, we have a unique identifier that can also relate to the time code. So we can either look at the way we've named the clips to know when they were imported and where in the CSV file we can find the time in, time out data, or we can look at the unique node ID of this. And node ID is kind of a weird thing. I'm just going to show you what it looks like if we were to go to app.project.root item children. Again, this is the Property Explorer add-on, which I recommend in another earlier video, which is called Useful Add-ons Access Item Info. We're going to go children. This should be children 0, I think. We'll check that. Nope, children 1. And then children 2, we'll just use this one. We can see that now we're looking at the name is 3 log 10, and one of the properties of this is this unique node ID, which we are getting for our file. So that is the first part of this video. That's the more data-centric stuff. Now we have all this data in here. We have all the files imported. In the next movie, I'm going to walk you guys through how we can create those subclips, and then we'll see how on length, if we need to do a third movie on dropping them into the sequence, or if we can just do that in the next one. But for now, you guys know how to create a CSV file and bring that data into Premiere. Now, this is just one application of what you can do with CSV files. You could import CSV files as markers. You can, I mean, there's a bunch of stuff that CSVs open the door to. So just get a little creative with it. Try it out. Comment if you have any issues, concerns, or any cool things that you've done with it. And I will see you in the next video. That way we can talk about creating subclips and getting our sequence all set up and ready for us to edit.